Members of the phylum Mollusca are called mollusks. Snails, oysters, clams, octopuses, and squids are examples of mollusks. Mollusks are soft-bodied coelomates that have a three-part body plan. Mollusks also have bilateral symmetry, and most mollusks have a shell. The body cavity in mollusks is a true coelom. In animals that have a coelom, the gut and other internal organs are suspended from the body wall and cushioned by the fluid within the coelom. The three parts that make up the basic mollusk body plan are the visceral mass, the mantle, and the foot. The visceral mass is the section of the mollusk body that contains the mollusk's organs. Outside of the visceral mass is a heavy fold of tissue called the mantle that forms the outer layer of the body and secretes the mollusk shell. Every mollusk has a muscular region called a foot, which is used primarily for locomotion. Mollusks are the first file of animals that we've studied whose members have organ systems. That is, groups of organs working together to perform a specific function. So we're going to go through a few of those. We're going to start with feeding and digestion. Mollusks can be herbivores, carnivores, or detritivores. They can also be filter feeders, and some are parasitic. They also have mouth parts that aid in their feeding. Octopi have a two-part beak. All mollusks except bivalves have a radula, a tongue-like organ covered with thousands of pointed, curving teeth used for feeding. Food is digested in the stomach of the intestine in the one-way digestive tract, and wastes are passed out of the anus. Next, we have excretion. A mollusk coelom is a collecting place for waste-laden body fluids. The beating of cilia pulls the fluid from the coelom into tiny tubular structures called nephridia, which recover useful materials such as sugars and salts from the fluid. The remaining waste leaves the mollusk body through a pore that opens into the mantle cavity. From there, it will just be passed out and diffuse into the water. Next is circulation. Most mollusks have a three-chambered heart and an open circulatory system. The blood in an open circulatory system does not stay completely within vessels, but instead fills spaces around the body organs. This is an inefficient system because the blood cells that have the oxygen and the nutrients are competing with all the other fluid cell things in that mantle cavity to get to where they need to go. But it's okay if the animal doesn't move much, like a clam, or moves very, very slowly, like a snail. Cephalopods and their relatives are exceptions because they have a closed circulatory system in which blood remains entirely inside vessels, just like ours. So this is much more efficient because they're very active. They need a large supply of oxygen and food, and so it's like the blood cells with the oxygen and nutrients can get exactly to the cells they need to get to in a much more timely manner. This is what allowed cephalopods, octopuses, and their relatives to grow to be so much larger in size compared to clams and snails. For respiration, most terrestrial snails have no gills. Instead, the thin membrane that lines the snail's empty mantle cavity works like a primitive lung. Most mollusks respire with gills, which are located in the mantle cavity. The mantle cavity is the space between the mantle and the visceral mass. Most mollusks extract 50% or more of the dissolved oxygen from the water that passes over them. Finally, we have reproduction. Most mollusks have distinct male and female individuals, although some snails and slugs are hermaphrodites. Fertilization of eggs occurs externally in most aquatic mollusks and internally in terrestrial mollusks and octopuses and their relatives. The fertilized eggs of most mollusks develop into a type of larva called a trochophore larva. Next up, we'll be discussing the similarities and differences between the three main groups, gastropods, bivalves, and cephalopods. Thank you.